You're listening to Short History Shorts audio, where history speaks louder than images. The year is 241 BC. For over 2 decades, Rome and Carthage have fought a grinding, punishing war for control of Sicily, a war now remembered as the First Punic War. What had started as a local conflict over Messana evolved into a sprawling Mediterranean campaign of attrition, sea battles, sieges, and endless manpower losses. After 23 years of stalemate, shifting alliances, and devastation across Sicily, both empires were exhausted. But as Carthage sent its final fleet to relieve the besieged garrison at Drepanum, it sailed straight into an ambush, into the jaws of a new Roman navy, freshly rebuilt, innovatively trained, and lying in wait off the Aegates Islands. What followed would be the final, decisive naval clash of the war. The Battle of the Aegates Islands was not only a military turning point, it marked the end of Carthaginian ambition in Sicily, the rise of Rome as a maritime power, and the beginning of an imperial rivalry that would dominate the next century. But to understand how Rome, battered and bankrupt, could launch a last-ditch naval assault and shatter Carthage's final hopes, we need to rewind. By the late 240 SBC, the First Punic War had dragged both powers into ruin. Rome had suffered catastrophic losses at sea, whole fleets destroyed in storms, tens of thousands drowned. Carthage had hemorrhaged money trying to maintain naval supremacy while fighting a brutal land war in Sicily. In the west of the island, the Carthaginian general Hamilcar Barca had waged a masterful guerrilla campaign to hold Roman advances at bay, but the tide was turning. Roman forces had slowly tightened their grip on key Sicilian cities, and by 242 BC, they besieged the critical port of Drepanum, one of the last Carthaginian strongholds. But there was a problem. Rome had no fleet. After the disastrous storm losses in 249 BC, the Senate had stopped funding naval operations. The Republic simply couldn't afford to build another armada, or so it seemed. But private Roman citizens, wealthy patricians, and merchants stepped in, funding the construction of a new fleet themselves. In one of the most extraordinary civic efforts of the ancient world, Rome raised and outfitted over 200 new quinqueremes, not through state taxes, but through voluntary contributions from the elite. And they did more than just build ships. They trained their crews with rigorous discipline, focusing not on boarding actions with the now abandoned corvus, but on maneuver, ramming, and classic naval skill. The consul, Gaius Lutatius Catulus, was put in command. Unlike previous Roman admirals, Catulus took his time. He drilled the fleet relentlessly, transforming it into a force that could match the Carthaginians in seamanship and speed. His goal was simple: blockade Drepanum and trap Hamilcar's forces on the island, cutting off all Carthaginian resupply. In Carthage, panic set in. The Senate scrambled to respond. They gathered a fleet, heavier than Rome's, but manned with rushed crews and poorly trained oarsmen. The Carthaginian objective was to break through the blockade, deliver supplies to Drepanum, and give Hamilcar the breathing room to continue his guerrilla resistance. On the morning of March 10, 241 BC, off the Aegates Islands near western Sicily, the two fleets collided. The Carthaginian ships were heavily loaded with supplies and lacked proper speed or maneuverability. In contrast, the Romans had stripped their vessels down for battle: no cargo, full rowing crews, and precise formations. As the wind shifted in Rome's favor, Catulus struck. The Roman fleet attacked with overwhelming discipline. They outmaneuvered the Carthaginians, used superior speed to isolate enemy ships, and rammed with brutal accuracy. This was not the old Roman naval tactic of boarding and melee. This was precision warfare at sea, and the Romans had mastered it. The results were devastating. Over 50 Carthaginian ships were sunk, more than 70 were captured. Thousands of Carthaginian sailors were killed or taken prisoner. The rest of the fleet fled in disarray. It was a complete and total Roman victory, and it shattered any hope of relief for Hamilcar's besieged army. Carthage, unable to raise another fleet or continue the war, sued for peace almost immediately. The Treaty of Lutatius was harsh. Carthage was forced to withdraw entirely from Sicily, pay a massive indemnity over 10 years, and forfeit all future claims to the island. Sicily became Rome's first overseas province, administered not as an ally's territory, but as a Roman possession. It was the dawn of a new era, one in which Rome would no longer be a landlocked central Italian power, but an empire with provincial governors, garrisons, and tribute. But the consequences were even deeper. The defeat at the Aegates Islands was a national humiliation for Carthage. Hamilcar Barca, who had fought so skillfully in Sicily, now returned home embittered and distrustful of Carthage's oligarchic leaders. His hatred of Rome was passed to his son, Hannibal. Meanwhile, Rome emerged from the war stronger than ever. Despite suffering enormous losses, the Republic had shown a staggering capacity to adapt, endure, and innovate. The privately funded fleet effort had not only saved the war, it had laid the foundation for future Roman dominance at sea. The Battle of the Aegates Islands is often overshadowed by the more famous battles of the Second and Third Punic Wars, but in many ways it was the most critical. It ended the First Punic War decisively, flipped the power balance of the Western Mediterranean, and transformed Roman warfare permanently. Never again would Rome accept naval inferiority. The lessons learned in Sicily and off the Aegates would be applied with deadly efficiency in the wars to come. In just a few decades, Hannibal would march over the Alps and bring terror to the gates of Rome. But even then, the legacy of Rome's first great naval victory would shape the Republic's ultimate response. It had been forged not by luck, but by sacrifice, civic unity, and an iron will to win. And in the waters off the Aegates Islands, Carthage had finally received its final blow.